So, this is part 4 of my Comfy Seats chat with James Blair. Anyone who's ever decided they're going to eat more healthily or make exercise a regular part of your routine or any other positive habit change, but then really struggle to actually get yourself to do it, this part's for you. No, absolutely, because it's funny because that actually brings us really nicely into the overall field of behavioural change. And I mean, I've been fascinated with this for years. Several years ago, I reached a point in my life where things weren't great. They were just basically, there was nothing major going on. It was just that some things needed to change, little by little. These things are always gradual. You sort of slowly realize that no boxes are ticked right now. And all of that had culminated into me being 2.5 stone heavier. Yeah, I know. Picture that. So 2.5 stone heavier. And it was bizarre how long I stayed in that state for, thinking, right, want to lose weight. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't obese. There was nothing, but I knew I wasn't happy and I could physically feel it. And, it was an issue. It needed to change. I tried everything. It was bizarre. And I would, when I found myself, having, binged again in the evening or whenever it was, whatever had happened, I'd get to the end of the day and think, what is so hard about this? Just don't eat the stuff. Just don't eat it. Done. Problem solved. Get up and exercise and blah, blah, blah. And I couldn't, and I became very fascinated with mindset at that point. I was already interested, and that really got me hooked, because behavioral change is so much more complicated than just, I've decided I'm going to do this. And I know, my prefrontal cortex knows, my conscious brain is all over this. I've got it. And, it's so much harder and more complicated than that. And I was actually fascinated when I read up, because the first time we met, we were mutually giving talks at the same event. And I looked into Pavelka, and I was really interested to find that you focus on the behavioral change aspect within organizations, and it's not just about these are the things you should be doing, here's the education, here's the information that you need. This is how you actually do it, or at least that's the impression that I get. So what's your advice to people who need to make that change and they know what they need to do? It's not an information issue. How do they do it?
Oh, fantastic. And again, super deep question. And it's kind of like we're at diving boards at the pool and you're like, go up to the next one. Just go up to the next one.
Just try it. It won't hurt. It'll only hurt for a minute.
If I call back to your experience and actually your story that you were sharing there, you expressed something that I talk about a great deal. In fact, it's really easy to look at what Pavelka's founder Jesse talks about as the logical aspects of health. We would call that the eat and the sweat, the diet and the exercise. Everybody knows that stuff. We live in the information age. If you want to find out a thing, you can know it within inside of 2 minutes. And if you really want to understand it, a couple of hours maybe. There are no barriers in terms of learning about diet or exercise. But unless we look at the broader, more holistic picture and bring in the mindset, or as we call it, the think, the relationships, the connect part, getting those two pieces, the diet and the exercise, to work can be a mountain to climb. And I'm not going to say it's impossible, because some people do. Mm-hmm. Some people wake up in the morning, they're like, right, I'm going to start running marathons and I'm just going to eat tin tuna. And it happens. Much to the frustration of all other human beings and animals on earth. But by bringing in, as you have, the idea of mindset, so the think piece, and then looking at the relationships, it's really easy for me to say relationships, and you'd think, just have a nice cozy group of friends who are really supportive, but it's deeper than that. So I know when I was particularly overweight following some sports injuries and the like, it was my relationship with myself and my own routines and behaviors that was broken. I didn't realize that I was chronically unhappy. So what I would do is I would seek dopamine behaviors, things that would make me feel good in the moment. Those then come with physical health downsides. I would then flog myself for making poor choices, and then we'd just start that rolling all over
again. Yeah.
Yeah. So you then have to look at, do I have a good relationship with myself? How do I view myself as an individual? What sort of person do I want to be? And how does that person behave? And then once you start looking into that, the behaviors that you want, it's then a question of mapping a path from where you are now to there. Behavioral change can be really complex. There was pre-COVID, but spookily prescient, there was a study on hand washing at Harvard.
What did they know?
How did they know?
Yeah, more on that later, folks.
Yeah, that's one to Google. Yeah, the whole point of this study was like, how the hell do we get people to wash their hands? So what they did was they gave everybody, they took away the excuses. So they were like, right, we are going to put an automatic like soap dispenser in your house. We're going to put a buzzer in that tells you when you should be washing your hands. So that there was no getting away from it. It wasn't because you lacked the facilities. It wasn't because the reminders weren't there. And still like 30% of people just weren't doing it, which is a horrifying number.
Yeah.
But as a man who sat in a toilet cubicle and listened to people just wander in and out without hearing the sink or the finger, that's life.
Yeah, sad but true. Yeah.
Sad but true. So what they discovered was the quickest entry point to stimulating the behavior change they wanted was to piggyback an existing routine.
Right.
So if you want to put a new routine in place, it's far easier to go, I will do that when I do this, than saying from now on at 10 o'clock every day, I'm going to do 1,000 sit-ups. It's far easier to say, I will wash my hands before I eat something, which is the method that Harvard eventually hit upon as like the key. They realized that if they tied hand washing to meal times, so that reminder came just before eating, everybody washed their hands.
Wow. Okay.
For the preparation of food, the sitting down to eat, where there's been a line drawn in the day and their brain has flipped and gone, right, I'm going to play the eating dinner tape now. In that gap between what they were doing before and the dinner time, there was a perfect opportunity to insert a new routine.
Is that because they were physically getting up anyway? Is it because you were kind of like, something clicks in the brain that says take some action, so that's half the battle? Is it that you're on the move anyway?
I remember like one of your espresso shot videos was about getting started.
Yeah.
And how like tasks can become really sort of nebulous and these dark, shadowy threats. But if you go away and you just do one thing, you suddenly think, oh, no problem, and you crack on. So like the fact that you are already in motion makes it far easier to do just one more thing. Yeah. So that helps. There's an interesting link here to the way routines in our brain are encoded. So like buried in the back there's a little piece called the basal ganglia. And what it does, it is your brain's like space and memory saving tool. So what it does is it encodes routines that it can play out later. The scariest and most common example of this is highway hypnosis. So but back when I used to commute places,
back when any of us used to commute places.
You get up in the morning, you get changed, brush teeth, wash your hands and all the stuff. And then suddenly it's like someone pressed fast forward. You're sat in the car park at work and you think, oh, I didn't pay attention to anything that just happened. But of course you did. And it's a really good example of mindfulness and hypnosis, because you have performed the basic motions of driving to a place 1,000 times. The changing of the gears will tend to happen at the same part of the road. Junctions will always happen at the same place. So unless something expected happens, your brain will just replay an old tape of doing those motions, and your conscious brain, the prefrontal cortex, is kept entirely out of it.
Yeah.
So you sit there and you have a natter with the person you car share with, or like you do really embarrassing heavy metal sing-along that people in other cars can see, and kind of your
Have you been
brain
following me, James? Is that what's
yeah. So our basal ganglia will basically, it's like a series of tapes, and it will just pick the right tape for the moment, and then that sequence will play without you thinking about it. But in those moments where you're changing tapes, your brain is like fully engaged.
Right.
And that's a really interesting place where you can say, right, this next program I'm going to run, I'm just going to add one more thing to it. Yeah. And then when that thing gets added, you're up and running, and it encodes and it embeds in the basal ganglia with the previous one, eventually becoming its own routine.
Yeah. Brilliant. I love that.
That was a slightly larger nutshell than I was planning there.
It's a big, it was like a sizable like walnut, I guess, or Brazil maybe, as opposed to the little hazelnut we normally go with. But no, it's fascinating. And I think the more we understand this, because at the end of the day, our brain is our biggest and best tool that we have at our disposal, isn't it? In terms of, everything that we do in life, we may as well use it. And I think the more people understand how it works, and what those obstacles are and why they're happening, the better. So that's a brief look at behavioural change on an individual level. But what if you're a business owner or a senior leader within a company and you want to make health and well-being part of your organisational culture? Basically, how do you get a whole load of people to adopt healthier habits? That is what's coming up in part 5.